Lily Carter was just 15 when she vanished from her mother's house one rainy Thursday night, leaving behind a backpack, a half-eaten sandwich, and a note that simply read, "I'm safe. Don't look for me." Alan Mercer, her high school drama teacher, was found 3 days later in a motel 2 towns over, alone, disoriented, and claiming he had no idea where Lily had gone. What started as a missing persons case quickly unraveled into something far more disturbing. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a secret world of encrypted messages, hidden phones, and a carefully constructed lie that had lived undetected within the halls of Brookwood High for nearly a year. This is the story of 5 lives forever changed by one man's obsession, and how the truth finally clawed its way into the light. In the heart of Elmridge, a small town where everyone knew each other's names, Brookwood High School stood like a monument to tradition and trust. The school wasn't particularly large or modern, but it had charm, a kind of timeless brick-and-mortar character that made parents feel safe sending their kids there. It was the kind of place where teachers stayed for decades, where rumors died before they started, and where nothing bad ever seemed to happen. Among the staff, one name came up more than any other: Mr. Alan Mercer. At just 32, he was young enough to relate to the students, but old enough to command authority. He taught English, ran the drama club, and coached debate. With his pressed button-down shirts, easy confidence, and dry humor, students flocked to his classroom even during lunch breaks. He quoted Shakespeare and Stephen King in the same sentence. Parents loved him because their kids started reading again. The faculty respected him because he brought results. He wasn't just a teacher, he was the kind of figure people imagined in those inspirational movies about turning lives around. Behind the scenes, Mr. Mercer kept to himself. He lived alone in a modest townhouse on the edge of town. No family, no pets, no real social circle outside of work. When people asked about his private life, he skillfully redirected the conversation, joking about grading papers all weekend or binging documentaries. It was easy to assume he was just a dedicated educator, married to the job. No one pushed too hard. No one ever had a reason to. Still, there were subtle signs that something about him didn't add up. Small moments, brushed aside. He never dated, despite being attractive and well-liked. He discouraged students from following him on social media, saying he wanted to keep boundaries. When he talked about his life before moving to Elmridge 5 years ago, the details were always vague. Mentions of a school in another state, a break from teaching, nothing concrete. But the town was trusting. And Brookwood High was the kind of place where people believed what they were told. That trust only deepened when the school named him Teacher of the Year 3 years in a row. The award came with a plaque in the main hallway, a feature in the local paper, and a short speech at the annual fundraiser. In his acceptance, Mercer spoke about guiding young minds and creating safe spaces for students to be their true selves. The audience clapped, moved by his passion. No one questioned it. Why would they? Things began to change slowly, so gradually it almost wasn't noticed. It started with one student, Lily Carter, a 15-year-old sophomore known for her quiet nature and brilliant writing. She was new to Mercer's class that fall, having transferred after her family moved across town. She rarely raised her hand, but when she did, she asked questions that made even the other teachers take notice. Mercer praised her talent, even reading her essays aloud in class. He gave her extra books, offered one-on-one help after school, and encouraged her to join the drama club. Some said he was mentoring her, others thought she reminded him of himself at that age. No one thought it was strange at first. But Jenna Lopez, Lily's best friend, began to feel uneasy. Lily, always reserved but open with Jenna, had become distant. She stopped sitting with her at lunch. She began dressing differently, carrying herself with a confidence that felt unnatural. When Jenna asked what had changed, Lily brushed her off with a smile and said, "It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. Behind the locked doors of Brookwood's English department, something was happening, something no one wanted to imagine. and while the town of Elmridge slept peacefully in the safety of their routines, one man had begun crossing a line that would shatter their sense of security forever. Lily Carter had always been the kind of student who disappeared into the background. At 15, she was small for her age, with long brown hair usually tied back in a loose ponytail and a soft voice that barely rose above a whisper in class. She wasn't unpopular, just invisible. Most teachers barely noticed her beyond her straight-A report card. She came to school, kept her head down, turned in flawless work, and left without making a ripple. But when she entered Mr. Mercer's English class, something changed. He noticed her immediately. From the first day, Alan Mercer had a way of making students feel seen, but with Lily, it was different. After collecting the class's first essays, he made a point of praising hers aloud. Raw talent, he called it. He added personal notes in the margins, more than he did for anyone else. Your voice is rare, one comment read. Another, you have depth most adults don't. Lily was flattered. No teacher had ever spoken to her like that. She began staying after school to get feedback. At first, it was once a week, then twice, then almost every day. To Lily, it felt like a friendship. To Mr. Mercer, it was something else entirely. He offered her books, not on the curriculum. Classics, poetry, plays with intense emotional themes. He told her she had a gift, and that she shouldn't waste it on teenage distractions. He invited her to join the drama club, and made her the assistant director, even though she had never auditioned. With him, she felt important, understood, elevated. She started dressing a little differently, more makeup, more effort. Her confidence grew, but so did the secrecy. Jenna Lopez, Lily's best friend since 7th grade, didn't like the change. At first, she tried to be supportive. She noticed Lily seemed happier, more expressive. But soon the signs became harder to ignore. Lily had a new phone, sleek, expensive, and definitely not the one her parents had bought her. When Jenna asked where it came from, Lily said it was a gift, and quickly changed the subject. She began skipping lunch, saying she had to work on drama club scripts. But when Jenna checked, there were no scripts being written. Only long, quiet hours spent behind the locked theater room door. One afternoon, Jenna waited outside the drama room to walk home with Lily. She heard voices inside. One was Lily's, the other unmistakably Mr. Mercer's. They weren't rehearsing. It didn't sound like a teacher giving advice. The tone was too soft, too familiar. Jenna's heart pounded. Something wasn't right. She told herself she was overthinking it. Mr. Mercer was a favorite among all students. He mentored dozens. But Lily wasn't like the others anymore. She had changed in ways Jenna couldn't explain, ways that didn't seem healthy. Meanwhile, Lily's home life had grown distant. Her mother, Michelle, worked late shifts at the hospital. Her father had left years ago. Most nights, Lily was alone in the house, her door locked, her phone always close. Michelle noticed but chalked it up to teenage growing pains. Lily was doing well in school, staying out of trouble. What more could a mother ask? Still, something lingered beneath the surface. Lily would smile at her mother's questions but never fully answer them. She hid her phone screen when texts came in. She jumped when the doorbell rang, and slowly, the lines between teacher and student, mentor and girl, began to blur in ways that no one was ready to confront. By the time anyone began to ask real questions, the damage had already begun. What looked like academic encouragement was a mask, one carefully constructed by a man who knew how to hide in plain sight, and Lily, brilliant and young, was drifting deeper into something she couldn't name, something she didn't understand. Michelle Carter had always believed she was doing the best she could. As a single mother balancing 12-hour nursing shifts and raising a teenage daughter, her life was a careful routine of survival. She left early, came home late, and tried to fill the in-between hours with meaningful connection. But lately, something had changed in Lily, and no matter how hard Michelle tried to explain it away, she couldn't shake the feeling that her daughter was slipping through her fingers. It started with little things, missed texts, unanswered calls, vague explanations about staying late at school. Lily had always been responsible. She didn't sneak out, didn't lie. So when she started claiming she had group projects or drama club meetings after hours, Michelle didn't question it, at first. Then came the night she came home early. Her shift had ended unexpectedly around 6 p.m. Michelle stopped for takeout, thinking it would be nice to surprise Lily with dinner. But when she pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. Lily wasn't home. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Michelle sat in the living room, takeout getting cold, her mind spiraling. 40 minutes passed before Lily walked in through the front door, startled to find her mother already home. Lily's story was flimsy, something about staying late to help a classmate run lines for a school play. She spoke fast, avoided eye contact, and rushed to her room without touching her food. Michelle didn't press the issue, but the knot in her stomach refused to loosen. That night when Lily went to sleep, Michelle quietly crept into her daughter's room. She felt guilty, but worry had overtaken everything else. She rifled gently through Lily's backpack, expecting maybe a crumpled note or a late assignment. What she found instead was a neatly folded piece of paper, slipped between the pages of a worn paperback. It was a letter, handwritten, in elegant cursive, that didn't match Lily's. Your mind is a place I wish I could stay forever. You see the world in a way no one else does. You're the only real thing I have anymore. Don't let them change you. There was no name, no date, just the letter and a single initial at the bottom. Michelle sat there, frozen, heart pounding in her ears. The tone was too intimate, too personal. And Lily, her quiet, thoughtful, 15-year-old daughter, wasn't supposed to be receiving letters like this. The next morning, Michelle tried to bring it up, casually, as they ate breakfast. Lily was unusually quiet, distracted, her eyes darting to her phone every few seconds. When Michelle asked how drama club was going, Lily simply nodded and mumbled, "Fine." When asked if anything exciting was happening at school, she shrugged. Michelle didn't mention the letter. Not yet. She wanted to believe there was another explanation, but her instincts, sharpened by years of working emergency rooms, screamed otherwise. She'd seen too many situations spiral because someone waited too long to act. Later that day, she called the school. Principal Ronald Banks listened politely as Michelle voiced her concern, but his tone remained calm and dismissive. "Mr. Mercer is one of our most trusted educators," he said. "If there's something concrete you're worried about, I'd be happy to look into it." But Michelle heard the message behind his words. "There's no problem here. Don't stir things up." That night, unable to sleep, she sat in her car and searched for the local police department's non-emergency line. She didn't mention names, she didn't even show them the letter. She just asked what it would take for someone to look into a teacher without causing alarm. The woman on the other end of the call listened carefully and told her, "Bring something real, something they can't ignore." Michelle hung up, hands trembling. She wasn't ready for what she might find. But something was wrong, deeply wrong, and she knew she had to keep digging, because now it wasn't just suspicion. It was fear. Detective Dana Collins had seen a lot during her 15 years in law enforcement, from domestic disputes to missing persons. Nothing much surprised her anymore, but something about the anonymous tip that came across her desk late one Monday morning unsettled her in a way she couldn't explain. A concerned mother, no names given, had reported a suspicion involving a teacher and a minor, something vague, but just specific enough to raise a red flag. The letter had been dropped off in an unmarked envelope, no fingerprints, no identifying details. Just the single-page note written in looping cursive, with phrases that were too personal, too intimate, and clearly not meant for a child. What stood out most was how careful it was. No obvious affection, nothing overtly inappropriate, but the undertones were unmistakable, and the signature at the bottom, a single initial. Collins had dealt with cases like this before. She knew the signs. Predators were rarely obvious. The worst ones were the patient kind, the ones who wrapped themselves in trust and professionalism. She began to dig. Her first step was quiet observation. She couldn't make a formal inquiry without evidence. so she posed as a school board assistant and contacted Brookwood High's administration to request a tour of the campus under the pretense of reviewing safety protocols. Principal Ronald Banks was polite but rigid. He spoke highly of all his staff, especially Mr. Alan Mercer. "Model educator," he said with a smile. "The kind you wish every school had." Collins made mental notes. While Banks showed her the classrooms and common areas, she asked if there were security cameras. He pointed them out proudly: front entrances, hallways, and select doors. No audio, but the footage was archived for several weeks. She requested a copy for review, again under the guise of safety audit work. Banks hesitated but agreed after checking her credentials. Back at her office, Collins loaded the files. She narrowed in on timestamps after school hours, when students had supposedly gone home. She focused on footage of the theater hallway, near the drama room where Mercer ran after-school activities. What she found disturbed her. Several times a week, sometimes as late as 9:30 p.m., Mercer was seen unlocking the side door and letting in a single student. Always the same girl. Long brown hair, backpack slung over one shoulder. She entered quickly, glancing over her shoulder. They remained inside for hours. The camera didn't capture what happened in the drama room, but the pattern was there. Collins needed more. She subpoenaed Mercer's school-issued laptop and phone records, citing a digital forensics inspection. Again, the request was disguised under broader departmental paperwork. When she got the device, her suspicion deepened. Mercer had wiped his internet history, but remnants remained: deleted messages, encrypted file names, an app installed and removed, one that allowed for secret texting behind a locked calculator icon. There were also odd financial transactions, small purchases at boutique shops that didn't align with a teacher's salary, receipts for jewelry, a new phone from an obscure online retailer, and gift cards bought in cash. None of it proved guilt, but it was more than enough to justify surveillance. Collins installed a tracking device on Mercer's vehicle one quiet night, while it sat unattended in the school parking lot. She also requested background checks in other states, wondering if Mercer's past held more shadows than he let on. What she found was unsettling: a teaching position in New Hampshire that ended abruptly, no listed reason for departure, no public record of misconduct. Just a gap, a disappearance, and then a new life in Elmridge. Still, nothing was enough to make an arrest. She needed to catch him in the act. Not just strange behavior, not just suspicion, something real, something done tanimo. So she waited. Quietly, patiently. She watched the cameras. She tracked the car. She mapped out his routine and cross-referenced it with the students. And then one Friday night, just after 9 p.m., Collins saw it happen again. Mercer unlocking the door. The girl slipping inside. But this time, she wasn't going to stay behind the scenes. She was going in. The parking lot behind Brookwood High was deserted, swallowed by darkness, except for a flickering streetlight that cast long, distorted shadows across the pavement. Detective Dana Collins sat in her unmarked car, engine off, radio muted, eyes locked on the entrance to the side wing of the building. The timestamp on her watch ticked past 9:04 p.m. She had already seen him arrive. Alan Mercer, dressed in his usual clean-cut fashion, unlocking the side door like he owned the night. A few minutes later, Lily Carter had appeared. She moved quickly, hood up, head down, eyes scanning the lot as if she knew someone might be watching. She slipped inside without a word. Collins watched the door close slowly behind her, locking them both into whatever Mercer had planned. Collins had been waiting for this: weeks of surveillance, research, and dead ends. She had the security footage. She had the financial anomalies. She had the disappearing teaching history. But all of it meant nothing unless she caught Mercer red-handed. This was her chance. She stepped out of the car, slow and steady, her footsteps silent on the pavement. She moved with practiced caution, her badge clipped under her jacket, a small recording device tucked into her inner pocket. No lights, no sirens, just her, the cold air, and the faint hum of electricity from the building's exterior lights. The side entrance gave a soft metallic click when she opened it, with the master key the school district had discreetly provided. Inside, the hallway was dark, except for the faint glow coming from under the drama room door. She approached quietly, every instinct on edge, her heartbeat loud in her ears. As she reached the door, she paused. Voices. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakably personal, intimate, careful, like the conversation existed in a world no one else was meant to hear. Slowly, Collins knelt and placed a small camera beneath the crack of the door. The live feed blinked to life on her phone. What she saw made her stomach turn. Mercer and Lily sat side by side on the couch used for rehearsals, far too close. His arm rested behind her on the cushion, just grazing her shoulder. She clutched a small gift bag in her lap. Collins could just make out the shimmer of a necklace peeking through the tissue paper. There was no studying, no scripts, no reason for a teacher and a student to be alone in this space, this late, with that kind of closeness. Then Mercer leaned in. It was slow, deliberate. He said something. Lily nodded slightly. His hand moved toward hers. Collins had seen enough. She pushed the door open in one sharp motion, her badge raised. Mercer froze, his face draining of color in an instant. Lily jumped to her feet, startled, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. Alan Mercer, you need to come with me. The room went still. Mercer didn't argue. He didn't speak. He simply lowered his head and allowed himself to be handcuffed. Lily stood frozen in the corner, trembling, eyes flickering between Collins and Mercer, as if trying to understand what had just shattered around her. Outside, the quiet night exploded with red and blue lights. A patrol unit had been waiting nearby. Officers moved quickly, shielding Lily from cameras as news of the arrest began to ripple through the town within hours. Michelle Carter arrived at the station before midnight, shaken but silent, her eyes hollow as she embraced her daughter, who had barely spoken a word since being brought in. The weight of what had happened, of what could have happened, was only just beginning to surface. Inside the holding room, Alan Mercer sat alone, staring blankly at the wall, his reputation unraveling by the second. But even as Collins prepared the paperwork, she knew the hardest part was yet to come. The lies were over. Now came the fallout. The town of Elmridge woke up to a nightmare it hadn't seen coming. By dawn, news of Alan Merson's arrest had spread like wildfire. Parents whispered nervously at bus stops, teachers exchanged stunned glances in staff rooms, and students stared blankly at their phones, replaying the same headlines over and over again. Beloved high school teacher, arrested in alleged relationship with 15-year-old student. The media wasted no time. News vans parked outside Brookwood High. Reporters hounded the district office. Once sleepy town was now the epicenter of a scandal that no one could have imagined just days earlier. And at the center of it all, Lily Carter, now forced into the harsh light of a story she never intended to be part of. The school immediately placed Mercer on administrative leave pending investigation, but that did little to calm the fury. Principal Ronald Banks held a press conference, his hands visibly shaking as he read from a carefully worded statement. He described Mercer as a trusted figure, someone who had passed every background check, someone they had never once suspected. But that wasn't enough for the parents. They demanded answers. How had no one noticed the signs? How had a teacher been allowed to meet with a student after hours for weeks, possibly months, without anyone raising a flag? Michelle Carter sat silently in her living room as the news played in the background. She turned the volume down every time her daughter's name was mentioned, even though it never was directly. The media had refrained from identifying Lily, but in a town as small as Elmridge, everyone already knew. Lily hadn't said much since the arrest. She spent most of her time in her room, curtains drawn, phone off, mind elsewhere. Michelle had tried to talk to her, but nothing got through. It was like her daughter had been switched off, trapped somewhere between shame and confusion. The police and a child psychologist had both told Michelle that recovery wouldn't happen overnight. It would be a slow unraveling. What Michelle hadn't expected, though, was the backlash. Some parents blamed Lily. Some students did too. Whispered rumors claimed she had made the first move, that she had wanted the attention, that Mercer was being framed. Michelle found anonymous notes in her mailbox. One simply read, "Tell your daughter to stay away from ours." The town wasn't angry at just Mercer. It was angry at what he had forced them to see. That Danger could wear a tie, smile at parent-teacher night, and hand out, as with gentle praise. Inside the police department, Detective Dana Collins was busy assembling the case. The evidence was strong, but she knew these cases were rarely clean. Mercer had a clean record. He had never been caught crossing a line until now. His lawyer, a sharp, polished man named Grant Holloway, was already building a defense. He claimed Mercer had only ever tried to mentor Lily, that he had been misunderstood, that the gifts were innocent, the meetings academic, the messages taken out of context. He painted Mercer as a tragic figure, a teacher who cared too deeply for a struggling student and got caught in a web of misinterpretation. But Collins had more than rumors. She had camera footage. She had the forensics from the wiped phone. And more than anything, she had a timeline that proved Mercer's behavior was not only inappropriate, it was deliberate and premeditated. Still, the court of public opinion wavered. Some defended Mercer publicly. Former students wrote posts online calling him the only teacher who ever believed in me. A few even suggested he was being targeted unfairly. Collins had seen this before. The most dangerous predators weren't the ones who lurked in shadows, they were the ones who knew how to wear trust like a mask. But that mask was cracking now. And what lay underneath was far worse than anyone had imagined. Alan Mercer sat behind the cold steel table of the interrogation room, his hands cuffed in front of him, eyes cast downward. It had been 4 days since his arrest, and he hadn't spoken a single word without his attorney present. But now he was alone, temporarily. Detective Dana Collins watched him through the observation glass, her expression unreadable. She had seen men like this before, the ones who wore their charm like armor and their silence like a weapon. His lawyer had filed a motion to suppress several pieces of evidence, claiming unlawful surveillance and lack of probable cause. It was a legal gamble, but one that could derail the prosecution's entire case if the judge agreed. Collins knew time was working against her. She needed more, something ironclad, something that couldn't be dismissed as circumstantial. She turned to the folder in her hand, the digital forensic report from Mercer's school-issued laptop. It had taken days to crack the encryption, but the results were worse than anyone expected. Hidden behind layers of password-protected folders was a collection of scanned handwritten letters, dozens of them, all addressed to L. Each letter was dated, tracked over months, and filled with obsessive, poetic language. He hadn't just written to Lily, he had documented his dissent. Some pages spoke of protecting her from the noise, while others fantasized about leaving the town together, starting over somewhere no one could judge them. Collins read them one by one, the knot in her stomach growing tighter. Mercer hadn't stumbled into a boundary. He had crossed a line with careful planning and deep emotional manipulation. The letters were enough to charge him with additional counts, evidence of grooming and coercion. But Collins still wanted to understand the how. How had a seasoned educator managed to operate in plain sight for so long, and why had no one spoken up until now? Later that day, she interviewed several students who had participated in the school's drama program over the past few years. At first, they were hesitant. Some were afraid to say anything that might cause trouble. But one student, Brandon, a former senior who had graduated the year before, finally opened up. Brandon described Mercer as magnetic. "He made you feel seen," he said, "like you were the smartest, most talented person in the room, but only if you kept his attention. If you pulled away, he'd turn cold, real fast." He recalled how Mercer would keep certain students after class, give them special privileges, like off-campus lunches or solo rehearsals in the theater. "We joked about it," Brandon admitted. "We called it the spotlight. If you had it, you felt like a star. If you lost it, it was like you never existed. Collins took notes furiously. The pattern was there. Manipulation disguised as mentorship, rewards that fostered dependency, isolation that blurred the line between teacher and friend. That night, she reviewed more security footage. On one of the earlier recordings, she spotted something she hadn't noticed before. Mercer handing Lily a phone, not her own. A second device. A burner. That explained how he had communicated with her without leaving a trace on the official school systems. When the forensic team examined Lily's backpack, they found the phone hidden inside a hollowed-out history textbook. It was locked, but Collins had seen enough to know that whatever was on that device would change everything. In the meantime, Mercer remained silent, his legal team pushing for bail. But Collins wasn't done yet. She filed for an emergency warrant to access the burner phone's contents. It would take a few more days, but she had a feeling it would reveal the final piece of the puzzle. Outside the station, a storm was rolling in. Thick clouds swallowed the moon, and thunder cracked across the sky like a warning. The truth was almost out. And with it would come consequences no one in Elmridge was ready for. The storm hadn't passed by morning. Rain lashed the windows of the courthouse as the town of Elmridge prepared for the hearing that everyone hoped would bring closure, or at least clarity. Inside the packed courtroom, silence hung like a held breath. Reporters filled the back rows. Parents, teachers, and students lined the benches, their eyes fixed on the man who once stood at the front of a classroom, now seated behind a defense table in a wrinkled suit and chained wrists. Alan Mercer's expression was unreadable. Neither defiant nor ashamed, he stared straight ahead, unmoving. His lawyer sat beside him, quietly organizing documents, maintaining a calm exterior. Across the aisle, Lily Carter sat with her mother, Michelle, flanked by two trauma counselors. She hadn't spoken publicly, and her face remained guarded, her posture stiff. The court had granted her the option not to testify, but she chose to be there, to watch. Detective Dana Collins stood at the center of it all, her case file clutched tightly under one arm. The burner phone had finally unlocked the night before, and what it contained shifted everything from theory to fact. Hundreds of messages, some encrypted, some hastily deleted, painted a disturbing timeline. Mercer had been grooming Lily for nearly a year. The messages were strategic, emotional, and manipulative. He called her his light in the fog, told her she was mature beyond her years, and promised that their connection was real, something no one else could understand. He sent her articles about forbidden love, quoted poetry about soulmates in hiding, and created fake email accounts to communicate outside the phone when he feared they'd be discovered. But it didn't end with words. Hidden among the files was a digital diary, entries written by Mercer in patented-coded language. He described his growing obsession, the risks he'd taken, and his fantasy of taking Lily away once she turned 16. There were plans, fake IDs, bus tickets purchased in cash, even a reservation at a motel several towns over. He had been preparing to disappear with her. Collins had all the proof she needed. When the judge entered, the tension cracked like thunder. The prosecution laid out their argument with precision, supported by evidence that was both overwhelming and deeply unsettling. They detailed the surveillance footage, the burner phone, the financial transactions, and the forensic analysis of Mercer's letters and diary. The courtroom listened in stunned silence as the assistant district attorney described how a man entrusted with shaping young minds had used his influence to isolate, manipulate, and control a vulnerable teenager. Mercer's attorney tried to push back. He painted the relationship as inappropriate but non-criminal, arguing that no physical contact had been proven. He claimed the messages were unfortunate expressions of emotional confusion, and that Mercer had never acted on anything illegal. But it wasn't enough. The judge denied bail. Mercer was ordered to remain in custody until trial, charged with multiple felony counts, indictment of a minor, possession of illicit materials, and intent to transport a minor across state lines. The courtroom remained still, no applause, no shouting, just the echo of the gavel and the sound of Mercer being led away, his face pale, jaw clenched. Outside, cameras flashed as Collins stepped down the courthouse steps. She didn't speak to the press. Her job wasn't over, but she had done what she came to do: bring the truth into the light. Lily Carter, watching from behind a tinted window, breathed for what felt like the first time in weeks. It wasn't over for her either. The healing would be slow, uneven, and complicated, but the illusion was shattered now. The man who had made her feel special, then trapped her in silence, would never walk free again. The rain began to slow, just slightly, as the town of Elmridge tried to find its footing again. And deep beneath the headlines, 5 lives had been forever changed, each marked not just by the crime but by the hidden fractures it had revealed.